Hi guys, I welcome you all to the next lecture in our anthropology series. So today we are going to start with probably the most, it is touted to be the most toughest parts of anthropology, the Hardy-Weinberg law and the concept of Mendelian population. Now what happens is, if anybody of you who doesn't like mathematics, okay, and has strong aversion to maths, so unke liye it is going to be a tough thing. But now here's the disclaimer that I'm giving you, that concept samjhana is my responsibility, okay? So do not worry, just keep your eyes, ears open, and you are going to understand every bit of Hardy-Weinberg law, and that is my responsibility, okay? So there you are not going to have any doubts, okay? So what we are going to do is that we are going to break this up into two parts, because I'm not going to cover it all in one lecture, because I know many of you do not have the maths background, and इसमें थोड़ा सा mathematical equation and all of that भी होता है. So because of that I am going to cover it in two parts. Today we are going to do the introductory video of this. Okay, today we'll cover up the introduction part, and tomorrow we are going to do it with the, you can say, we'll try and take and dig more into the concept, and we'll try and understand it with the help of a calculation also. ठीक है, so we are trying to, हम कल कुछ hypothetical numbers and all we'll take them, and we are going to put them in the equation and all of that, and then we are going to proceed with it. So let's start with it today, and today the topic is Hardy-Weinberg law and Mendelian population. So now before you understand the concept of Hardy-Weinberg law, you need to understand what the concept of Mendelian population is, right? So before you understand what is Hardy-Weinberg law, Mendelian population पता होना चाहिए, right? So what is Mendelian population? Now we have been reading about the Mendels Law, ठीक है, on inheritance and all of that. So basically, obviously, something which is related to Mendels Law would be, you can call it as a Mendelian population, right? So basically क्या होता है? Mendelian population is any group which interbreeds, ठीक है, amongst each other, and that shares a common pool. For example, if I tell you that example ले लो, that this is an island, okay, this is an island where nobody from outside comes, and there are, you can say, there are 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 8 9 10 11 12 13 14 people, okay, let's do it 15. So it's an island where 15 people live, ठीक है, and because there is no migration in or outwards, ठीक है, there is only these people who are interbreeding amongst themselves, ठीक है, they are interbreeding, and all they are following the Mendel's principle, so to say, because क्या हो रहा है, they are mating with each other, they have a this, you can call this is their gene pool, because whatever genes which are present in these 15 people are only going to get recombined within each other, right? So इसी से whatever gene pool that is there, it is derived from these 15 people, which is again going to get recombined in different combinations, and that is going to be the whole common pool, common gene pool that they are going to have. So Dobbs-Hansky ने define किया था, he defined Mendelian population as a reproductive community, okay. So it is a reproductive community of sexual and cross fertilizing individuals. Sexual, obviously, because here we are not talking about asexual kind of reproduction, ठीक है, we are strictly talking about sexual reproduction and cross fertilizing, ठीक है, individuals that share a common pool. Obviously, when two people reproduce, ठीक है, their genes kind of mix in the gametes, तो उसको fertilization बोलते हैं ना, that is fertilization. So whenever there is a common pool of what happens is that there are people, ठीक है, they interbreed amongst themselves, and then whatever common gene pool that is there, that is the Mendelian population. So if this island has no migration from outwards, no effect of evolutionary changes, ठीक है, for example, there is, because they are migrating in amongst themselves, so no outside force is acting upon them, only they are breeding amongst themselves, right? So when they are breeding amongst themselves, they are creating a common gene pool, ठीक है ना? Whatever genes are there in these 15 people, only those are the ones that are going to get into the next generations. ऐसे कोई different gene is not going to come, right, which is not present in these 15 people, right? So it is based on the concept of population isolation. What is population isolate? Now population isolate क्या होता है? Isolate is that either you are geographically separated, right? That means that you have restricted, in this case you have a island and you are interbreeding only in this island, right? So that is a population isolation criteria in this case. Others could be endogamy, right? Many groups only breeds among themselves. जैसे in Indian case में आप बोलते हो there is caste endogamy, right? So it is also a way to restrict the reproductive activities, right? So when you are strictly interbreeding amongst a group, so you can call it a population isolate, ठीक है? So whatever interbreeding is happening, it is happening in only that restricted and endogamous group. So that is what is Mendelian population is all about, ठीक है? So in Mendelian population, there are no evolutionary forces like natural, there are no migrations, ठीक है? There is no mutation happening, ठीक है? Then there is random mating is happening. That means even in these 15 people, you are not selecting with which person you want to breed. There is an equal opportunity and equal chance of everybody reproducing with everybody, right? So in that group there should be no restrictions. So there is random mating. Population size is large because generally when we talk about Mendelian population, either तो I've just told you what the concept of population isolate was, so I took a 15 people का example. But in the case of Mendelian population, it has to be a large population, because in smaller population there are chances that if one mutation also occurs, that is going to have a larger effect. But in a bigger group, the chances of a single mutation causing a very big variation is not there. So you understand, for example, if I have 100 mangoes and one gets rotten, ठीक है? What is the probability or how much change it is going to put on my situation? Whereas if I tell you that I have only 2 mangoes or 4 mangoes and out of that one gets rotten, right? So you understand. So the concept says that if the population size is large, any chance factor and occurrence of any chance factor is highly reduced and it does not put a very disproportionate change on the whole population itself, ठीक है? So what did we study about Mendelian population? That is that first of all the concept of population isolation. That means they are a group of interbreeding restricted groups, endogamous groups, ठीक है? That means they are strictly interbreeding amongst themselves, ठीक है? Thereby creating a common gene pool, ठीक है? And on that there is no evolutionary forces acting like mutation, like migration, like natural selection. Population size should be large, and when all these conditions are met, it is believed that the Mendelian population is in equilibrium, ठीक है? So what can you get out of it? If all these conditions are met, that means there is a common gene pool, there is interbreeding, there is isolation, ठीक है? And no evolutionary force is working on it. That means the Mendelian population is in equilibrium. That means equilibrium का क्या मतलब? That means there will be no change in the population. Whatever the kind of population there was, वैसा ही रहेगा. The gene pool is not going to change. There will be no variations at any genotypic and allelic level. So now you understand the concept of Mendelian population. Now even if you do not understand, Hardy-Weinberg law is majorly about this only. So उधर जाके भी also your doubts are going to get cleared. But I hope you have understood the concept of Mendelian population. Now what happened was, let's go back and read, recollect in our thoughts what Mendel was saying. So Mendel talked about the law of segregation. What was the law of segregation saying? That for example, this is one diploid trait, ठीक है, diploid cell that there is, at the time of gamete production, they become independent to each other. That means now they have become 4 different traits, ठीक है, and they have equal probability of getting selected. Both of them have 50% chance of getting selected. That means now they become 4 different alleles, and udhar kaise bhi karke, you know, there can be 4 different ways of getting selected. That means they are not getting mixed, theek hai, they are not getting mixed and they are segregating at the time of fertilization. Fertilization ke time pe there is segregation happening, theek hai. So diploid is becoming haploid and then they are again you know, combining in with the other partners trait, theek hai. So this is how the law of segregation he was talking about. First thing was this. Second thing was the law of dominance, right? So law of dominance was saying that even if, for example, I say this is these are the 2 characters in a person and these are other 2 characters in the other partner, theek hai. At the time of gamete formation, what was happening, that there are equal chances of any of them getting selected. For example, in this case I say there could be 4 types na, 4 types ho sakte hai. Either one combination would be this, one combination would be let me just make it, yes, 2 combinations would come out like this and one combination would come out like this. So these are the 4 combinations that are going to be there, right? If this is parent A, this is parent B, these are the 4 likely combinations that are going to be there. Now let us assume that the blue one is the dominant trait. So all these cases, even though the genotype are different, but the blue trait is going to express itself in the phenotype, and recessive will only express when it is in the homozygous condition. Blue trait, because it is dominant, it is going to express itself even in the homozygous as well as heterozygous condition. So this was the whole Mendelian laws. Thoda I have just told you briefly because that is not the topic for the day. If anybody wants to understand that, you can go back, watch the Mendelian laws. Okay, so this is what we have written here. So now what is the need for the Hardy-Weinberg law? We have revised what Mendel was saying. So there was a issue that people started to think that if Mendel's law were actually playing a part, that these laws, you know, alleles were getting separated at the time of fertilization and the law of dominance and recessive traits were working. So there should have come a time when dominant trait should have you know, started to increase in the population and recessive trait should have eliminated in the long run, but this did not happen. Dominant trait doesn't mean that it is going to be more in the population. It is not like that. Dominant trait is only, it only means that dominant trait, if there is in a you know, in a genetic combination, if there is a dominant trait, it is going to express itself. It doesn't mean that it is going to be more in the population. That is not what the idea was, right? So when we talked about, when people started to read about Mendel's law, there was a idea that people started to think that if this was possible, that Mendel's laws were possible, so why the genetic variation or maintenance of genetic variation happens in population? That means if dominant, segregation, all these concepts were working, why there is A, B, AB, O, different blood groups, similarly different hair colors, different eye colors, okay, different body types, heights, weights, okay, fat deposition. Why was this? Because dominant trait should have easily, you know, took the dominance, right? In the long run, uska frequency should have increased, but that did not happen. In different populations, the proportion of different genotypes or allelic frequencies more or less remain the same. ठीक है. So this was the concept, and people started to think, and people started to think that some contended that dominant traits should increase in the population and recessive traits should decrease in frequency, which is not what was observed in the real populations. That means if Mendels laws were working the way he was telling, so dominant traits should have increased in the long run and recessive traits should have decreased in the long run, because हमने देखा 3:1 was the ratio. That means in 3 cases, whether it was homozygous or heterozygous, dominant allele was expressing itself. So if you take out the probability of recessive allele expressing itself, it is 1 as compared to 3 of the dominant. So dominant trait should have increased, but this did not happen. So then Hardy and Weinberg came and they published their independently, they published their papers, and they found they did pioneering work in population genetics and tried to refute the arguments why it doesn't happen, why the frequencies of different alleles in a population are maintained, how they are maintained, and they came up with a mathematical formula showing it. Okay, so now you must have understood the concept. I'll just go back again say, so basically Hardy Weinberg जो principle है या whatever we are reading now is a sub part of population genetics, because now we are talking at a population level. What is the population? We are humans, ठीक है, we are living at a place, ठीक है, and along with different species, ठीक है, but we are together, not one population, because we are different species. So in our case humans will make up one population, ठीक है. So here we are talking about one population, and population genetics we are studying because genetics as a subject in anthropology has come up with it is answering the most curious questions, ठीक है, regarding evolution, ठीक है. It has combined itself with the archaeology, ठीक है, and then trying to understand the evolution, because हम क्या कर रहे हैं today, we are trying to study genes, DNA, genetics, and with this we are studying genetics of the fossils also, to understand the evolutionary changes that has happened in the past, that are going to happen in the present or is happening, and where are we going to lead, where it is going to lead us in future, right. So in anthropology, which is in which we are trying to study the humans, we have combined different aspects. Archaeology is one, linguistic is one, society is one, culture is one, biology is one. Biology mein we are studying genes also, genetics we are studying. Genetics ka one part we have already covered. Now we are starting with population genetics and how different chance factors, evolutionary factors play a part, and this is why we are reading the Hardy-Weinberg law or Mendelian population. So now you understand what is the basis, why we are studying it. Now Hardy-Weinberg law, we have talked about it, why it came, because they gave a formula, they gave a mathematical formula, and they tried to explain why was it that, you know, what Mendel was saying, that if the Mendel's laws were at play, so the population of the dominant trait should have in a way increased over the period of time, but that did not happen. Different alleles were maintaining itself in the population. So that is why Hardy-Weinberg law came. So now if you have to say Hardy-Weinberg theorem, what is it? So you can say it talks about distributions of genotypes, okay, distribution of genotype frequencies in a population. That means, for example लेके बात करते हैं, how many people have black hair, brown hair, red hair in the population, ठीक है. So this could be a genotype distribution of a genotype, because black hair, brown hair, red hair, they are type of a hair, right. Similarly wavy hair hai, straight hair hai, right. All these are different characters, and the distribution of these genotype frequencies in a population are studied with the help of Hardy-Weinberg law, and it is you can say it's a fundamental null model for population genetics. I'll tell you why it is a fundamental null model. Now do not focus on that, okay. So now definition of Hardy-Weinberg law. It says in a large random mating population, the genotype and allele frequencies remain constant in the absence of evolutionary influence from one generation to another. That is why it is called a null model. Because ये क्या बोल रहा है? It is saying that the allelic frequencies or genotype frequencies should remain constant in the absence of evolutionary forces. That means there should be no migration, ठीक है? There should be no genetic drift, ठीक है? There should be no mating according to certain there should be no mating without that means there should be random mating, but ज़रूरी नहीं है ना, ऐसा नहीं होता. This is not happening in the real world. That means, for example, there are caste endogamy, ठीक है? Even if you are living in a village, ठीक है, you are marrying only in your caste. That means you are restricting yourself. You are not marrying within a large group. Even though you are living in a village of 100 people and you have only 20 people of your caste there, so you are restricting your marriage in those 20 people. That means you are not following the random mating pattern. So evolutionary influences like migration, which is obviously you are not living in an isolated world right now, right, where migration is a phenomena, both in migration and out migration. You are not living in a utopian world where these things are going to happen. So migration bhi hoga, there will be genetic drift also, there will be mutations taking place also, mating is also not random, right? So it is a fundamental null model because it said that in the absence of evolutionary influences, which is not the case in the actual world. But if it is a null model, why do we have to study it? We have to study it because if we need a baseline, right? We need to have a baseline. For example, if you want to study the evolution, but how to compare, there should be certain baseline, right, to compare. So if you do not have a parameter on which you are going to compare, how are you going to actually come up with a conclusion, right? So in Hardy-Weinberg law, we are taking a very you can say a very standardized way, okay, on which we are going to on which we are going to look at different things, ठीक है? So इसमें you can say that इसमें we can evaluate in the current times, जैसे Hardy-Weinberg law है, ठीक है? It is used to evaluate population stratification and other sorts of non-random mating, ठीक है? So it can use for that purpose, or it can be used to see how the alleles or how the evolution is taking place, how these evolutionary trends play on a population. So all these things are that which we are trying to study with the Hardy-Weinberg law. So I think you must have understood the idea, and I do not want to over put anything in your mind, because this is a topic I wanted to cover in two lectures only, because if I do it in one, you are not going to understand many things about it. So basic, I think you must have understood what is Hardy-Weinberg law. It's a mathematical formula. It's a part of population genetics. In this, we are saying that in a large random mating population, okay, the genotype and allelic frequencies remain constant in the absence of evolutionary influences. Now, what are the evolutionary influences? What is the formula? How we are going to calculate it? This we are going to do tomorrow, because if you try and understand it today, I feel that a lot of things will not be clear in your head. So you please understand this part, go back and revise this part. Tomorrow we are going to learn about the assumptions that Hardy-Weinberg took, the mathematical formula, and we are going to solve it also. Okay? So I hope you guys liked the lecture. If you did, guys, please like, share and subscribe. Thank you.